What's up guys, Enkiri here, and I've been talking about the 20 rep squat, aka the Widowmaker squat, a lot lately. You guys have seen the sets that I've been doing in my recent training, and I made a super in-depth video last week discussing the many benefits of using this training method, including the ability to pack heaps of muscle mass and size onto the thighs in an incredibly short period of time, which is part of what happened to me, and it's why I've been harping about them so much lately. And so people have been wanting to try the method out for themselves, and they've been asking me a lot lately, at what point in their training would it be appropriate for them to implement this method? And as such, I thought it would be prudent to discuss how this method of squatting pertains to beginners, since there are a lot of you guys out there, and you're also ironically the ones who are most likely to be asking me this question in the first place. And if you want to click off this video right now, I'll just give you the short answer right here. This is not a beginner training method. Honestly, I wouldn't even put most early intermediates on it either. But once you've moved a little bit further into the intermediate stage, or you're even nearing the end of that stage, then this could potentially be a fantastic option for you to build up your legs, build up your mental toughness and fortitude, increase your ability to tolerate lactic acid buildup, increase the resilience and endurance of your core musculature, and increase your overall general conditioning as well. Now, there are two reasons that I say that this method is not at all for beginners under any circumstances. And the first one is quite to the point and straightforward, so to put it bluntly, beginner lifters are generally not very strong. Even if they come into the gym stronger than the average guy, they're still nowhere near their own strength potential. And they're wholly incapable of demonstrating the strength that they do have into an unfamiliar and complex movement pattern like the barbell back squat. What this means is they're not really going to get anything out of doing this method. Let's look at it like this. If I'm a ranked beginner and I can squat 155 pounds, that's the most that I can squat at this very moment, sure. But that weight is probably not representative of how strong that my legs actually are, because my nervous system is far too unfamiliar with the movement pattern to display my full force potential in it. This is the case with any lift or exercise that's unfamiliar to you, and this is precisely the reason why the initial strength gains that you make on any new exercise come on so rapidly. So if my max is 155 pounds today, but we know that my legs are actually capable of generating much more force than that, do you think that my training would be more productive if I lowered my training weight all the way down to a weight that I can squat 20 times, which might only be 50 or 60% of that number, which isn't even an accurate representation of my maximum force production potential in the first place? Or do you think I might be better off starting off my training by spending a year or two working on a proven and basic beginner training program? One that's going to have me working with saner set and rep protocols and is going to increase my max up to say 275 or 315 pounds, or something that is much more closely representative of my true force production potential in relatively short order. Now, if you go the former route, you probably will get a little bit stronger at first, even doing the 20 rep squat sets with baby ass weights, simply by virtue of the fact that you're a complete novice, and even doing air squats would probably make you stronger at this stage. But it'll be a much slower progression than it needed to be. The results will be subpar, and your squat technique is never going to become good this way. Now, if you go the latter route, however, and you hold off on the 20 rep squats until you've built yourself up a small base to stand on, both in terms of strength and lifting technique, then you'll actually be able to use weights that are impactful here. The method itself is not built on intensity as an end-all be-all, but the more weight that you can pull off using with it, pull off being the key term here, then the more profound of an impact it's going to have on the body. 115 pounds for 20 reps isn't doing much of anything for anybody, and it would only take a brief glance at an individual capable of this feat to realize that it isn't much of a feat at all. To do so with 225 pounds or 275 pounds or even 315 pounds, however, is a completely different story. An individual who has built the requisite physical and mental capacities needed to pull off this feat is an individual who's going to stand out from the crowd. This is an individual who has learned how to push himself hard. He's spent his fair share of time putting in the work, and he will be rewarded in kind when he pushes himself through these true 20 rep efforts and he earns the unique adaptations that they confer. But to suggest that a beginner does a set of 20 rep squats misses the entire point of 20 rep squats in the first place. Pushing things to the brink with a heavy ass weight on your back. A beginner is neither capable of using heavy weights nor has any business pushing themselves to the brink at this stage in their training. It's both unnecessary and counterproductive. And the second reason a beginner has no business doing 20 rep squats has to do with motor learning and fatigue. I addressed this issue briefly in my Athlean-X critique video from last year because I noticed that Jeff had prescribed sets of 20 reps or maybe it was even 25 reps on the squat for beginners. But now it's been brought to my attention that Pure Bullfit actually defended this notion as well. So I think it's time that we put an end to the idea that beginner lifters should be doing such high reps on the squat in their training. And before we jump into this one, I do have a confession to make. As much as Bullfit has loved to spew his diarrhea-style bullshit all over my content this past year, well, I have to admit that I've never actually watched any of his videos before. Well, that's not entirely true. I've watched exactly one Pure Bullfit video, and it was in the wake of the whole Athlean-X and vegan gains fiasco a few months ago. But that's the only one I've ever watched. As such, and much to my dismay actually, I've apparently missed a few gems of his nestled snugly within all that nut-hugging content. One of these gems is in response to my Athlean-X critique video where I just mentioned I had been questioning Athlean-X for prescribing sets of 20 or 25 reps on the squat to beginners. Bullfit's response to that was as such. In another video, he talked about recommending 20 rep squat sets to beginners who are still learning how to squat. And I honestly forget which video it was specifically, but I just can't fathom where that advice even came from because it simply defies logic.
Let me help you out there. For beginners, establishing a motor pattern is the most important thing. You allude to that point. The best way to establish a motor pattern is through repetition, not through intensity. More reps, higher rep sets allow for more repetition than low rep sets. We have entirely too many people who are focused on immediately the weight on the bar before they've mastered the movement. We've got quarter reppers in all the gyms in all the states and all the land. Do you want quarter reppers? Because that's how you get them.
Now, I'll just never mind the part about quarter reppers here because the irony of Athlean-X recently endorsing quarter squats juxtaposed against this clip of Bullfit defending Athlean-X while simultaneously lambasting people who quarter squat is more hilarious than any storyline that I could possibly tell you. Hey Bullfit, do you want quarter reppers? Because Jeff endorsing the quarter squat is how you get quarter reppers. So let's just take this quote from the top then.
For beginners, establishing a motor pattern is the most important thing. You allude to that point. The best way to establish a motor pattern is through repetition, not through intensity.
I completely agree with you. This is fantastic advice, and I applaud you for proclaiming it so boldly and so confidently. So let's just move on to the next part.
More reps, higher rep sets allow for more repetition than low rep sets. We have entirely too many people who are focused on immediately the weight on the bar before they've mastered the movement.
And here's where we start to run into some problems. We have a NASM certified personal trainer who doesn't seem to grasp how motor learning occurs. More reps, yes, sure. No fucking duh. Repetition builds motor patterns. That's like weight training 101. High rep sets though? And I beg to differ. High rep sets induce fatigue. Fatigue breaks down motor patterns and impedes motor learning. Practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. You can't have perfect practice when fatigue is mounting. You cannot execute perfect reps when fatigue is mounting. Fatigue breaks down technique. As technique breaks down, which is inevitable in novice trainees, and you execute subpar repetition after subpar repetition, you do nothing but ingrain suboptimal, inefficient motor patterns. And if your motor pattern is unstable, as it is in every beginner trainee, and you continue to log tired, suboptimal reps, all you're doing is delaying the time to technical mastery. You'll never become a good squatter. And as a consequence of that, you'll never maximize your leg size, strength, or power if you practice high rep sets as a beginner trainee. High rep sets that accumulate large amounts of fatigue, like the 20 rep squat, are not conducive to motor learning at all. I will repeat that. High rep sets that induce large amounts of fatigue, like the 20 rep squat, are not conducive to motor learning at all. And you would do well to ignore the advice of anyone who tells you that they are. Doing a greater number of moderate rep sets, where intraset fatigue is kept to reasonable and manageable levels, is how you maximize motor acquisition and create stable and efficient motor patterns. Look at someone like me, for example. I've been squatting with weights for over 10 years. I've done 530 pounds in the gym and 523 pounds in competition, both in knee sleeves, while weighing just 160 pounds. I'm a strong and proficient squatter by any definition, and I have reaped all of the benefits that are entailed as such. I didn't get there by doing 20 rep squats. I would not have gotten there by doing 20 rep squats. I'm only experimenting with them now after all of these years. And speaking of which, let's take a look at one of my recent sets so that we can observe my lifting technique. This is 335 pounds for a set of 18 reps. Now, let's take a peek at the first couple of reps just so we can see how they look. Pretty crisp, right? Now, let's take a look at the last couple of reps of that same set. And those ones were not so crisp. This weight represents just 63% of my 1 rep max on the squat. And I've been squatting for over 10 years. Now this is gonna be a drastic underrepresentation of what I've actually done over the years, but let's pretend that I've done 2 squat sessions per week, so we'll call it about 100 sessions per year for 6 of the last 10 years since I discovered the weight room. And we'll just ignore the first couple years of my training career where I was just squatting 1 time per week. Now, that would be 600 squat sessions in my lifetime. Yet, here's my technique, breaking down by rep number 18 and before with just over 60% of my 1 rep max on the bar. Now, imagine that I'm a beginner who's been squatting once a week for 6 months, probably less than that. What do you think is gonna happen by the time that I get to rep 13 or 14 or 15, let alone fucking rep number 20? I'll give you a hint. It won't be pretty, and it certainly won't be facilitating or solidifying stable, uncompensated, or efficient motor patterns. But you might say, well, the beginner will be using way less weight, so they won't experience that same form breakdown or those compensations that you're talking about. Okay, but then I have to ask, why are you even squatting in the first place? Is it to build muscle? Is it to build strength? Because you build muscle and you build strength in the initial phases of weight training by building up your baseline level of capability, not by squatting an empty bar 100 times. And there is no escaping that. You solidify motor patterns by using meaningful and challenging but manageable weights. Anyone can squat the empty bar with perfect fucking form endlessly. But that's not indicative of anything, because if the only stress that you've ever experienced is the empty bar, then what do you think is going to happen to your perfect technique when you start using weights that are actually stressful to the body and are actually capable of eliciting meaningful adaptations? It's going to collapse because it's a stressor that you've never encountered before. You adapt to stressors by encountering and intelligently overcoming them. That's literally what the said principle tells us. And guess what? Weight on the bar is an imposed demand too, and you can only adapt to it by encountering it. And that goes for technical adaptations as well. Building perfect technique using a broomstick or a barbell loaded with candy-ass weights is a fallacy. It doesn't work. You build perfect technique with proper load management, which starts with using challenging but manageable weights, training within proper set and rep protocols, avoiding an excess of intraset fatigue, using proper cueing, and then logging as many clean and high quality reps as possible. And guess what? 20 reps isn't a proper set and rep protocol for normal weight training, and it isn't suitable for beginners or for motor learning. So here we have a certified personal trainer who is endorsing 20 rep squats specifically for beginners and specifically for the purpose of motor learning. Two notions that are highly inefficient at best and blatantly dangerous at worst, which can only mean that this individual is either completely incompetent at training people or is an unscrupulous brown-noser who is fully willing to outright lie simply to earn brownie points from someone with an incredibly large following. As with most things in life, the answer probably falls somewhere in the middle. And before I close here, I just want to touch on the last part of his statement where he says,
we have entirely too many people who are focused on immediately the weight on the bar before they've mastered the movement.
And then he goes on his little rant about people who quarter squat. And okay, cool. But this is a straw man argument. I don't teach people to quarter squat, and I've never once said that people should load weight onto the bar at the expense of quality movement. Anyone who's doing things properly, either on their own or under proper guidance, would do exactly not this. But because I have a background in strength sports and I argue about the importance of building up a strength base in the initial phases of weight training, a factor which is actually critical for long-term success, somehow that's extrapolated to argue that I'm saying that we should chase weight on the bar at the expense of everything else, including forming proper motor patterns. This argument was literally manufactured at the Scarecrow factory because it is one big ass straw man. Now, I already pointed out the fallacy behind the notion that we can somehow master a movement that is contingent upon load without at least heeding credence to that variable, but never in any piece of information I have ever published have I ever indicated that weight on the bar should trump proper lifting technique. On the contrary, I emphasize proper lifting technique constantly, but properly managing load is an important aspect of developing the most stable and most efficient lifting technique possible, because load is the variable that's always going to be in flux, no matter what stage of your training career that you're in. To develop sound and stable technique, you begin training at the point just before technical breakdown occurs, and you increase the load at a rate that's just below the threshold at which that breakdown would occur again after adaptation has taken place. You do this enough times for a long enough period of time, and eventually you can squat an impressive weight with perfect form. It really is that simple. But this exercise exists to be loaded. To ignore the aspect of load is foolish. The squat exists to be loaded. The increase from baseline is what causes the adaptations to take place. And gaining the adaptations are why people perform the movement in the first place. Loading as an ever-changing variable is an inseparable concept from weight training. I thought that was obvious. And as such, technical mastery is only meaningful if it's able to be maintained in spite of increasing loads. And if it's not, well then guess what? you haven't actually achieved technical mastery. You've just learned how to make lifting really light weights look pretty. So in closing, beginners should not do 20 rep squats. Something basic like Ripeto's starting strength protocol or the Strong Lifts 5x5 program are both very well known and readily available, and both of these methods would make for a simple and user-friendly way to make the most out of your early stages of training while allowing you to create stable and efficient motor patterns and preparing you to make the most out of something like the 20 rep protocol down the road. Sometimes those programs get a bad rap, but that's mostly because people either don't know how to execute them correctly or simply don't know when to move on from them. But you don't muddy the waters unless you have to, and you don't do 20 rep squats until you need a big kick in the ass to get things rolling again. The 20 rep squat program should be looked at like jump starting a car. Once the car has a few miles on it, the battery's gonna die every now and then. It's inevitable, and you're gonna have to give it that extra kick to get things going again. But if your car's brand new and the battery is brand new, trying to jump it is gonna do nothing but overcharge it. Give it a jolt that it doesn't need and prevent it from running optimally. The same is true with beginners and 20 rep squats. Stick with what's tried and true and basic at first, and then once you've paid your dues and earned your stripes, then you can experiment with more advanced protocols such as this one. Anyway, that's all I got for today, guys. Please be sure to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and definitely leave me some love in the comments down below. Also, if you're interested in online coaching, shoot me an email at enkiri.elite@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to pass some more information your way. Or simply visit my website, www.enkirielitefitness.com, for more details. Anyway, keep training hard, and I'll catch you guys next time.